that he was in the airport, right?
Okay.
I mean, imagine that
All
shit,
right.
right?
I like that.
I would know shit when you land, you know what I mean? Because it's that deep, right? A long story short, right? Long story short, he pursued his situation, right? And he was in the Ritz-Carlton, from what I hear. And it didn't go well for him because he didn't do shit protocol-wise.
Wow.
That's all I want to say about it.
You need to hear this. 50 Cent landed in Houston, Texas, easily one of the most powerful and influential rap hubs on earth. But he skipped a major step. He didn't check in with J. Prince. Because of that, he got robbed. His chain was taken, his pride was bruised, and the truth is, the whole city saw it coming before it even went down. This isn't just internet gossip or a random rumor. It's the law in Houston. There is an unwritten code that every rapper, mogul, and major figure is expected to follow the second they step foot in that city. It doesn't matter if you're from New York, Louisiana, Atlanta, or anywhere else. When you touch down in H-Town, you pick up the phone, call J. Prince, and let him know you're there. That is the protocol and the level of respect required. If you don't, Houston has a way of reminding you exactly how things work very quickly. 50 Cent believed his name was big enough and his security was tight enough to bypass that. He thought being Curtis Jackson, the man who survived 9 shots, a Forbes list mogul, and the leader of G-Unit, meant he didn't have to answer to anyone in any city. On paper, that logic might make sense, but Houston is different. But Houston doesn't care about what's on paper. In that city, things run on a completely different currency: respect. The moment you stop showing it, you become a target. This is the full story of the check-in rule and the history behind it. We're looking at what J. Prince built in Houston that made this protocol a necessity, the others who had to learn this lesson the hard way, and exactly how 50 Cent's refusal to follow the rules led to one of the most notorious incidents in the city's hip-hop underworld. Let's break it all down. To truly understand what happened to 50 Cent, you first have to understand Houston itself. And to understand the city, you have to understand the man who essentially runs it, at least when it comes to the rap game and everything connected to it. James Andre Smith. Born on October 31st, 1964, he was raised in Houston's 5th Ward, a neighborhood famously known as the Bloody Nickel. There was no silver spoon, no industry connections, and no blueprint for success. He was just a kid from the hood trying to figure out how to survive the same streets that were swallowing everyone around him. Interestingly enough, J. Prince didn't actually get his start in the music business. He started with cars, opening Smith Auto Sales on the west side of Houston. He dealt in everything from everyday vehicles to high-end exotics. Athletes, hustlers, and local figures all moved through his doors. Being at the center of that world taught Prince exactly how commerce and street politics intersect. He realized that the man who controls access effectively controls everything. In 1986, he channeled that same drive into Rap-A-Lot Records. This was the first label to provide a legitimate platform for Southern hip-hop, at a time when New York DJs were overlooking the region to push their own music. J. Prince identified the gap, filled it, and built an empire. The list of names is legendary. The Ghetto Boys, Scarface, Willie D, Bushwick Bill, UGK, Bun B, Pimp C, Trey That Truth, and Devin the Dude. What people outside of Houston often fail to grasp is that what he built wasn't merely a record label. It was a structured political body and a massive power network that held street legitimacy and industry influence at the same time. J. Prince wasn't just signing contracts. He was mediating gang truces in the 3rd Ward on Tuesday night and sitting in executive meetings with major label CEOs by Wednesday morning. He operated in 2 worlds simultaneously, earning deep respect and even fear in both. By the 2000s, J. Prince's influence had expanded far beyond Houston. He was the one who connected Drake to Lil Wayne, leading to Drake's signing with Young Money through his son Jas Prince. He was the person Meek Mill reached out to when the pressure from his beef with Drake became overwhelming. Countless artists from various cities have turned to him when situations became too volatile to handle alone. He functioned as a fixer, a power broker, and a true godfather of the culture. With that level of authority comes a very specific expectation regarding how people conduct themselves when entering his city: the check-in rule. Let me explain what checking in actually entails, because many people hear the term and dismiss it as some outdated ritual. It's not. It's deeper than that. In cities where one person or one organization holds significant power in both the streets and the industry, there is a clear expectation. When major figures arrive, whether they are rappers, executives, or celebrities carrying serious money and jewelry, they are expected to make contact. They announce their presence. They reach out to the person who manages that city's network and essentially say, "I'm here, I'm good, and I'm coming in peace." Now, why is that call so important? Because that single conversation accomplishes several things at once. First, it signals respect to the existing power structure. Second, It places you under a form of informal protection. If the plug knows you're in town, the streets understand that you are off limits. Finally, it builds a rapport and creates an opportunity for mutual benefit. When you choose not to check in, a few things happen. For starters, since no one knows you've arrived, no one is looking out for you. Furthermore, if someone does decide to test you, there is no network activated to step in on your behalf. But then there's the third consequence, and this is the one that really hurts. It is viewed as a sign of disrespect, as if you believe your status is so great that you don't need to acknowledge someone else's territory. In that world, that kind of arrogance comes with a price. Jay Prince has been the architect of this rule in Houston for decades. He has discussed it in interviews and detailed it in his book The Art and Science of Respect. That title alone reveals his mindset. Respect isn't optional. It is a science calculated, deliberate, and necessary. When it isn't shown, there are consequences. What's truly wild is that Jay Prince doesn't just apply this rule to local figures or up-and-coming rappers. He applies it to everyone. It doesn't matter if you are a major artist, a billionaire businessman, or someone traveling with private jets and full security details. If you are in Houston, you check in. That is the law. The streets of Houston have consistently enforced this standard, whether Jay Prince directly orchestrated it or not. The culture he established ensures that failing to check in essentially means you are unprotected. In a city with so many serious players, being unprotected is a recipe for exactly what happened to 50 Cent. However, before we dive into 50's story, it is important to note that he wasn't the first major figure to be taught a lesson for ignoring protocol. This has happened several times, and each incident further solidified the legend of Jay. Prince's reach, the most discussed situation, and the one referenced in the clip, involves Jay-Z. We should be very clear about what is confirmed and what is alleged, as these stories often blend fact with fiction. What Jay Prince discussed publicly during a podcast with Noriega and DJ EFN was that Jay-Z visited Houston and stayed at the Ritz-Carlton, 5-star billionaire-level accommodations. Despite the high-profile visit, he didn't check in, didn't make the call, and failed to acknowledge the power structure in the city. Jay Prince, speaking in that famously smooth yet pointed manner, mentioned, as you heard in the clip, that things didn't go well for Jay because of that choice. He didn't dive into the specifics, keeping it cryptic. He simply noted that Jay pursued his own situation, and protocol-wise it didn't end well for him. The streets have been debating what that actually means for years. Some claim Jay's team was caught off guard, while others suggest it was a different kind of violation. Perhaps a moment of personal embarrassment, or a situation Jay Prince could have easily prevented if Jay had just made the call. The details remain murky, which is typical for street stories involving people powerful enough to control the narrative. Regardless of the specifics, the message was unmistakable. Even Jay-Z, arguably the most commercially powerful rapper alive, isn't exempt from Houston's check-in rule. That is the level of authority Jay Prince operates on. He isn't just talking about local figures checking in. He's talking about Jay-Z, billionaire Jay-Z, Roc Nation Jay-Z. The implication is that none of that success protected him from the consequences of ignoring Houston's code. Then there's the 2018 situation involving Tekashi 6ix9ine at South by Southwest in Austin. 6ix9ine arrived in Texas without following the proper protocol. He had ties to 50 Cent's circle through his security, and the Rap-A-Lot team was reportedly unhappy with his conduct and what they perceived as disrespect toward Jay Prince. The tension escalated to the point where it contributed to a series of events eventually linked to the 9 Trey Gangsta Bloods federal case. 6ix9ine's team reportedly tried to retaliate against Rap-A-Lot affiliates back in New York, and that retaliation was later used as federal evidence. When a Texas beef leads to federal consequences, you realize how deep this truly goes. Each of these scenarios, Jay-Z at the Ritz, 6ix9ine in Austin, and the numerous smaller names who have been tested in Houston over the years, has built the same reputation. Houston is not a city you enter without showing proper respect. And Jay Prince is not a man you bypass without consequences catching up to you. This brings us to 50 Cent. Now, to be clear, 50 Cent is not a soft individual. We have to establish that before anything else. This is a man who survived being shot 9 times. For nearly a decade, he was the most feared rapper in the industry, taking shots at everyone from Ja Rule and Rick Ross to Kanye West. He turned his rivalry with Murder Inc. into one of the most commercially successful runs in hip-hop history. Curtis Jackson does not intimidate easily, but this is where 50 made his mistake. The same mistake many powerful people make when they travel. He confused his personal reputation with universal protection. He assumed that because no one in their right mind would challenge him on a basic level, that immunity extended to every city and every territory regardless of the rules established by other powerful figures. That isn't how it works, especially not in Houston. When 50 landed in Texas, he had his security and his team with him. He checked into the Ritz-Carlton, the same type of high-end accommodation mentioned in the Jay-Z situation. It was the same caliber of visit, but he never picked up the phone to call Jay Prince. He didn't send a message through a mutual contact or acknowledge the power structure in H-Town in any way. He just landed, moved like he owned the place, and went about his business. But word got out. because that's exactly what happens in Houston. The city talks. When a high-profile figure arrives and fails to check in, the people tied to J. Prince's network find out. They always do. WAC 100 directly confirmed this dynamic, noting that they received calls the moment he was at the airport. Think about that. 50 Cent steps off the plane, and before he even reaches his hotel, the network already knows he's arrived and that he didn't make the call. That shows you just how tight J. Prince's information network is in that city. What happened next is the part that really shocked people. At some point during 50's time in Houston, while he was at the hotel and moving without the invisible protection that a check-in provides, someone got to him. His chain was taken, his jewelry was gone, and the message was crystal clear to anyone who understands Houston politics. This is what happens when you don't follow the code. Now, let me be specific about why that message was so loud. This wasn't some random smash and grab. Typical criminals don't just happen to find out a major artist is in town, track his movements, time their approach, and successfully get to someone with 50 Cent's level of security. That requires intelligence, coordination, and a network that already knows exactly who is in the city, where they are staying, and who lacks protection. The absence of J. Prince's backing is what created that opening. The robbery was simply the consequence of skipping protocol. When you start connecting the dots, it becomes impossible to call this a coincidence. First, look at the timing. 50 was in Houston for a specific reason and was moving on a set schedule. The robbery didn't happen in some random part of town. It took place right near his hotel and his home base. That isn't opportunistic crime. Opportunistic crime is getting jumped at a gas station. This was targeted. Second, consider the silence afterward. 50 Cent is one of the loudest men in hip-hop, a man who has turned every conflict in his life into content and posts about everything. Yet he was uncharacteristically quiet about this. No Instagram posts, no Twitter wars, and no G-Unit response videos. Nothing. That silence speaks volumes. When 50 is loud, it usually means he feels he has the upper hand. When he's quiet, it means he received the message and understood that swinging back wasn't the right move. After all, who do you even swing at? You can't call the police on Houston street politics, and you can't diss your way out of a situation when the people you're up against operate in a world where words don't offer any protection. 50 immediately recognized what had happened and where it led back to. He made the strategic decision to absorb the loss and move on. Thirdly, J. Prince's track record makes this scenario make perfect sense. This is a man who was investigated by the DEA in the 1990s for allegedly using his label as a front for drug trafficking. In fact, the DEA agents investigating him were ultimately convicted of corrupt conduct themselves. That tells you exactly how politically connected and untouchable he has managed to become. This is a man who, when WAC 100 went to war with him publicly on Clubhouse, had someone from 6 Deuce Brim call WAC to tell him to back off. J. Prince doesn't defend himself on Instagram Live. Instead, he makes phone calls to the right people and situations resolve themselves. That is the level of power we're discussing. When you fail to check in with a man operating at that level in his own city, you aren't just being disrespectful, you're being naive, and the streets have no sympathy for naivety. Fourth, consider the pattern. Jay-Z at the Ritz, and then 50 Cent at the Ritz. Different situations, but the same hotel, the same city, and the same lesson: no check-in, no protocol, and suddenly something goes wrong. J. Prince keeps the details vague and his hands officially clean, but he ensures the story circulates through the right channels. Whether it's WAC 100 on Clubhouse discussing calls from the airport or word spreading through the culture that this is the price of disrespecting Houston, it's not an accident. This is a deliberate communication strategy. J. Prince uses these incidents as parables. He lets these stories circulate so that the next artist, mogul, or major figure thinking about stepping into his city knows exactly what the stakes are. The robbery of 50 Cent wasn't just a random crime. It was a message sent to everyone watching. This is where things get interesting. When this story began to circulate within the culture, the reactions revealed exactly where everyone's loyalties and understanding of the game stood. Many people outside of Houston, those who grew up respecting 50 Cent's reputation and knew him as the man who survived the impossible, struggled to process it. How do you rob 50 Cent? How do you get to someone with that level of security and street credibility? The answer, once you understand Houston's code, is that 50 Cent's reputation and security only hold weight in environments where people are intimidated by him or his network. In Houston, people operate under a completely different authority. J. Prince's network isn't concerned with 50 Cent's reach because they have their own. Within that sphere of influence, 50 Cent was simply another unprotected visitor. Within Houston circles, the reaction was completely different. People understood immediately. There was no shock, just a sense of tired acknowledgement. The general sentiment was, of course this happened. This is simply how things work in the city. It has happened before, it will happen again, and Houston will continue teaching this lesson until everyone finally learns it. Perhaps the most telling part of the story is 50 Cent's response, or more accurately, his lack of one. When he eventually addressed the J. Prince situation publicly, it wasn't from a place of aggression. He spoke about the check-in rule in a way that was measured and careful. While he didn't back down entirely, because 50 never fully retreats, he also didn't go to war. He understood the geography of the conflict. He knew that attacking J. Prince on a track or through social media wouldn't yield the same results as beefing with a rapper from New York or LA. J. Prince simply doesn't respond through the media. He responds through the streets. For all his bravado, 50 Cent knew that wasn't a war he wanted to fight in Texas. Meanwhile, Tony Yayo, one of 50's closest G-Unit associates, spoke more directly about the J. Prince situation. He called out what he characterized as an extortion-style operation disguised as a respect protocol. Yayo's take was that the check-in rule is essentially a shakedown. Pay your respects or pay with your property. From one perspective, that argument has weight. If you're at a place like the Ritz-Carlton with professional security and someone can still get to you just because you didn't call the right person, is that true protection or a protection racket? However, that framing, while understandable, misses the cultural context. In Houston, J. Prince's network isn't just about taking from those who don't check in. It's about maintaining a system of order that has kept the city's hip-hop ecosystem intact for nearly 40 years. J. Prince has mediated gang truces and prevented countless situations from escalating into full-scale war. He has been a stabilizing force in a city that without that structure might have devoured itself. The check-in rule is effectively the price of admission into a system that, when it works in your favor, provides genuine value. The issue is that outsiders often only see the cost rather than what they stand to gain in return. Let's zoom out for a moment, because this story is about more than just one robbery in one city. It speaks to a fundamental tension in hip-hop culture that never truly gets resolved: the conflict between independence and territory, and between nationwide fame and local power. 50 Cent built his entire brand on the idea that he answers to no one. From his early days in South Jamaica, Queens, through his mixtape era, to his rivalry with Murder Inc., the theme was always consistent. Curtis Jackson does not bow. That identity was his product, and it's what fans bought into. His fearlessness, his autonomy, and the image of a man who couldn't be killed, pressured, or controlled. But here is the reality of the situation. Every city has its own established power structure. No matter how massive your name becomes on a national scale, the people who control the territory locally don't care about your Billboard charts. They care about who has shown them respect and who hasn't. The bigger your name is, the more glaring it looks when you bypass their protocol. At that level, it's no longer just a forgotten phone call. It looks like you think you're too big to call. That turns a simple oversight into a deliberate statement of disrespect. J. Prince understood something that many in the music industry fail to grasp. Street credibility and commercial success are two different currencies, and they don't automatically convert. You can have $100 million and still be vulnerable in the wrong city. You can be the most feared name in rap and still get touched because you didn't respect the local ecosystem. Respect has to be renewed in every room you walk into. It doesn't just carry over automatically. That is the lesson 50 Cent learned in Houston. It wasn't that his name didn't carry weight. It does. The core lesson here is that influence is often contextual. Within his own territory, J. Prince's authority is absolute, and navigating that environment without repercussions requires a direct acknowledgement of that reality. Now, critics, and Tony Yayo has voiced this specifically, argue that such a system is fundamentally flawed. They believe no artist should be forced to check in just to move safely through a city, viewing the practice as little more than extortion disguised as cultural tradition. There is certainly merit to that critique. However, to be completely honest, the check-in rule wasn't created in a vacuum. It was born out of a reality where the streets are genuinely dangerous. Artists arriving without local ties or situational awareness often become easy targets for criminals who have no affiliation with J. Prince or Rap-A-Lot. In those specific instances, tapping into J. Prince's network offers legitimate security. The 50 Cent robbery is a prime example of what occurs when that network isn't utilized. It wasn't J. Prince who took the chain. It was the city itself, the chaotic and unchecked elements of a major urban environment, preying on someone moving through it without a layer of protection. J. Prince represents the armor, and 50 Cent simply refused to wear it. Looking at the present day, the situation has become far more complex, public, and contentious. As we moved into 2025, 50 Cent significantly expanded his presence across Texas, particularly in Houston. He's been making major moves in real estate, media, and business, navigating the state with the confidence of someone establishing a long-term headquarters. J. Prince hasn't remained silent during this expansion. The two have been trading public shots with a level of directness that is uncharacteristic for both men. Prince has made it clear he feels 50 Cent is out of line, suggesting that his business maneuvers in Houston are a continuation of a disrespectful pattern. Meanwhile, 50 Cent has framed the check-in rule as nothing more than an extortion scheme. He's gone on the offensive across social media and various public platforms, dismantling the narrative that he owes anyone in Houston anything. That is exactly where things stand right now. No cap. Both figures have amassed so much power, influence, and real-world leverage that a clean resolution seems unlikely. J. Prince commands the Houston network and decades of street credibility. On the other hand, 50 Cent possesses national reach, political ties through his media and business ventures, and a track record of winning every conflict by simply outlasting his rivals. However, Houston presents a unique challenge. Outlasting an opponent isn't enough if you cannot move freely within the city, and 50's ability to establish a long-term presence in Texas depends on how this dispute is settled. It is difficult to build a business empire in a city where your presence is challenged by the most influential underground figure in that city's history. Eventually, something will have to give, and the entire culture is watching. Every artist with ties to both men is now forced to move carefully. Furthermore, every business entity looking to operate in Houston is monitoring the situation closely, as the outcome will set the tone for the next generation of the check-in rule. It will determine whether the practice evolves, collapses under pressure, or becomes so reinforced that it defines the next decade of Houston's hip-hop landscape. Ultimately, it comes down to a simple truth. Real recognize real, and this story is authentic on every level. 50 Cent arrived in Houston without acknowledging J. Prince, which proved to be a mistake. This isn't because J. Prince is untouchable or because the check-in rule is beyond moral criticism. It's because you cannot enter someone else's ecosystem and act as if their rules don't exist. Every city has its own code, and in Houston that code has serious consequences. 50 Cent learned this the hard way. The robbery was not a random occurrence, and the silence that followed was a calculated move rather than a sign of weakness. The lingering tension between these two men is about more than a personal feud. It is a clash between two opposing philosophies on power and hip-hop. One side believes your reputation provides protection, while the other maintains that your relationships are your shield. In Houston, relationships win every time. Over 40 years, J. Prince has built something that cannot be dismantled by chart success, a Forbes ranking, or a hit television show. He built loyalty, structure, and a specific code. Whether you view that code as honorable or a form of extortion, you have to respect the results it has produced. Houston's hip-hop scene wouldn't be what it is today without J. Prince, a fact the artists from that ecosystem understand better than anyone. 50 Cent is undoubtedly one of the greatest, but he bypassed protocol in a city where protocol is everything, and Houston reminded him of that reality. Drop a comment below. Do you think the check-in rule is a legitimate street code, or just straight extortion? If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, because in our next video we're diving even deeper into J. Prince's history and the true extent of his reach. You won't want to miss it. Real talk.